Do you want to gain weight? Do you want to lose weight? Or do you just want to feel better? I am super excited to introduce you all to Dave Thompson, who is an avid health and wellness enthusiast. Welcome, Dave. We are going to get into fasting, what the myths and misconceptions are, what it is, how to start, what it's not, and all of the different things around it, who it's for. And I'm really, really interested in this because I myself have heard so many different thoughts and ideas and conceptions about what fasting is. So I'm really, really excited to demystify and really clarify for everybody what fasting is. So thanks so much for being here, Dave.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Thanks, Nat, for having me.
So why don't we start with what are the myths and misconceptions of fasting in general?
I think a lot of people like to call it a fad and sort of uh, just villainize it on this piece. It's some type of fad diet. It's actually how humans traditionally ate throughout history, right? We didn't have refrigerators, we didn't have things like that. So we were usually hunter-gatherer types of things. So you're gathering the food that you can get and you're moving on to next areas where you can get more food or hunting, traveling with the animals that are roaming around. So humans are used to not eating for longer periods of time. We hear it about in religious contexts. There's several cultures that fast during different periods of times and celebrations and holidays for them. Uh, but it really is a staple of human health throughout history. A lot of the things that have popped up over the last 60, 70 years for disease states didn't exist 150, 200 years ago when we ate more on our natural rhythms. We were more connected with nature, and we just really didn't have the modern day conveniences that we do today. So I think a lot of people don't really know how to step out of like modern times where you can just go to the cabinet or the refrigerator and, oh, let me get another snacky poo here. Um, so I think we've really gotten away from how humans actually historically ate, and then how we've actually can tap into our own body's natural defense mechanisms and healing mechanisms. So fasting is one of the greatest ways to reduce inflammation throughout your body. Inflammation is the number one cause of all disease state. Inflammation has to begin, and that goes into a chronic state of inflammation, which starts leading into chronic disease states. So it's a great way to turn specific genes on and off. And I think that's kind of a good overrun, I guess, for the fasting side of the house, from where a lot of the big misconceptions come from. I think it's just everybody's kind of looped it into this new fad diet phenomena, which essentially is just propaganda for big food companies and big pharma companies to sell you more food, right? Don't fast, eat as much as you can eat.
Yeah, no kidding. And I know you're in the States right now, and I grew up in Canada, so and I'm in Europe, and it's also so different around the world how people eat. And I was actually I was looking at the Global Wellness Institute this morning, and as you were talking, I was just kind of reminded about some of the wellness trends or the cost of traditional healthcare system. Some of the things that I was reading there, like, the global cost of largely preventable chronic disease is estimated to reach a staggering $47 trillion by 2030. And that was from the World Economic Forum. Now, I'm not going to get into so many different stats because we're not here to talk about that, but I'm really interested in this topic because I also think there's this misconception that fasting is starving yourself. And, there's different notions, especially like me growing up in an all girls school, like there was a lot of, eating disorders and things like that. And so I also wanted to make that clarification that fasting, what you're saying is it's a form of health. it's a form of health and well-being and having your body in a state of well-being, right? And
Mhm.
so maybe let's get into what is fasting and what are the different types of fasting? Because I don't know if people really understand that.
Right. And that's a great, really good place to start with it. So when you use kind of fasting as a whole, there's several different types of fasting that goes into it. There are water fasts, there are intermittent fasting, there are prolonged fasts, there's 5-2, and OMAD. There's a whole bunch of different like types of fasting, and they all have their own place and benefit with things. So I'll give you a little bit of background with me. For the most part, I usually do about a 20-hour fasting period most any given days. I've been doing a little bit more toggling back and forth between OMAD, which is one meal a day, but I still eat close to my 34 to 3,800 calories every single day in that window. So on the days I only eat one meal a day, I basically sit there and I sit down and I get ready to eat for about an hour. So I'll work through a couple different various foods, and there's a whole bunch of research and literature that used to say you can only get 30 grams of protein in one sitting and all these different things. Once again, it's habitual, right? It was a marketing campaign to get you to eat more frequently. And anything that you do more frequently, you're going to do more of. So, food industry, eat 6 meals a day, right? Like, so you're keeping your insulin levels up high. When they drop, your body's getting reinforced to hit more insulin and bring that insulin level. So your blood sugar level back up. So you're running through these crashes with the way most, I would say, most authority agencies out there in the healthcare space would tell you to do. With fasting, what it's going to do is it actually helps you tap into your own ability to heal yourself. Um, Fasted states show lower rates of inflammation. Fasted states show higher rates of growth hormone levels and actual hormones that you need to function and feel youthful, right? So when we were younger, we had higher growth hormone levels, um, varying between women with estrogen and men with testosterone. As we age, those things start dropping. Even our normal growth hormone levels, IGF-1, begin to drop. With fasting, it actually stimulates your body to produce those things. Um, it actually kicks your body into what's called an autophagy state. So that's when your body's actually utilizing fat and diseased. They're called synapse cells or I butcher this one, zombie cells, or just basically misfolded proteins, and they will reproduce, but they do not continue on the DNA coding. So you start getting these disease and weakened cells that really don't do a whole bunch as we age. They actually get more toxic for us as we age. This actually shuts that down. It actually uses those cells as fuel versus utilizing the food that we're consuming. So it really helps our body naturally tap into what it knows how to do. And our body absolutely knows how to heal itself and take care of itself. So tons of studies around fasting with healing, fasting with anti-aging, fasting with anti-inflammatory. And like I said, I think one of the major agers out there and one of the things that actually rapidly deplete our body is overconsumption, right? And high insulin levels. Um, and essentially our aging process is we're never giving ourselves a chance to really get into autophagy states where we're actually self-regulating and healing our body, utilizing stored body fat for ketones. Our brain loves ketones, our heart loves ketones, our digestive tract loves ketones. But in today's modern world, we've been told that our brain loves carbohydrates, our heart loves carbohydrates, and that's just essentially not the case. We are designed to run off of ketones. So one of the biggest drivers for this, where I'll start with and where everybody should kind of entertain or start if you're interested in doing it, is intermittent fasting. Um, this is where you will essentially eat between about anywhere from a 4 to 12 hour window, varying. So I think the bare bones minimum for anybody is kind of a 12-hour fast. So eat for 12 hours, fast for 12 hours. So that doesn't mean you're eating constantly for 12 hours, but you're eating in a 12-hour window, and then you're giving yourself a 12-hour break. What that actually does is it actually helps your digestive tract sort of take a break versus having to break down food all the time. And then you're also kind of running along, they also call it the circadian rhythm diet. So you're basically working a little bit more with the Earth's natural rhythm. You know, stop eating after 7, don't eat again until 7 a.m. There's actually a lot of research around why that's more effective because of our liver, the way the actual liver processes bile and those types of things that help us digest. That all begins to slow down after 7 p.m. So you're just going to tax your body a little bit more by eating after that, because it's going to be harder for your body to produce what it needs to do after those types of traditional hours. Not to say there aren't people that have worked nights and all those other types of things that life kind of pops up. But a general rule of thumb, if you're not conditioned for that, your body starts slowing down. That's why we start getting tired in the evenings and wanting to go to sleep and those types of things. Our body starts slowing down with those things. So intermittent fasting is a great place to start. 12 hours on, 12 hours off. If you're really looking into weight reduction, or really needing to decrease inflammation throughout your body, extending that period of time. But I usually recommend start off with 12 and 12 every 5 days, add an hour. So you go to 13, 14. If you're feeling really good, you can jump maybe 2 hours every 5 days, kind of give yourself a chance to transition. Um, so great place to start. It actually starts giving you a chance to start feeling like what good feels like, right? A lot of people don't realize what good feels like. And once you take food out of your body has a lot more energy because it's not constantly breaking down food, which uses about 60 to 70% of our energy each day is to digest food. So it gives you a really good shot of, like I said, I do typically like 20 hours is usually probably about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right before I'm about to break my fast. Like I'm just buzzing with energy. I'm really clear. I'm sharp. I actually plan a lot of time with work in those windows because I know I can, get 2 to 3 times as much stuff done during that time because I'm just clicking on all cylinders. And I think it's because like my brain has high levels of ketones and it's the fuel that it's looking for.
That is so fascinating. There was so much in there. There was something you said, I just wanted to clarify. Was it the BG1?
Um, oh,
GB?
IGF-1
Oh,
factor.
IGF-1. What is that? Just for
So, um, you have two chemicals. Ghrelin is your hungry hormone. So ghrelin and IGF-1 go kind of hand in hand. So your growth hormones is usually what keeps you younger, right? Like when you're youthful, you have higher levels of that, more youthful skin, stronger bones, stronger muscle density, or more muscle and more muscle density. So a lot of those types of things play in together. But with when ghrelin levels are high, your IGF-1 actually kicks up as well too. And there's a couple other chemical reactions that happen, like mTOR, which is a uh, chemical that has been shown too much of it can increase rates of cancer and other types of growth and tumors. This actually smashes that, basically turns that that process off so that your body's actually into a different state where it's actually reducing the or reversing the effects of oxidation, reversing the effects of toxins and those types of things in your body. So allowing your body to once again sort of self-regulate its healing process, versus being driven by the growth factor that's constantly turned on by our eating habits. So we're eating all day long, raises our mTOR, raises our growth and our basically reproductive of our cells. So our cells kind of get into this state of just reproducing, where this kind of like shuts that off, where we're actually reproducing quality cells with better mitochondria, which is our energy source of our cells. And it's actually getting back to more of a DNA, like our true genetic makeup, right? Versus disease cells. Or I've always tried to think of a PC way of saying this, but essentially, like the really tough way to this, it's just like they're retarded cells. They're not reproducing the way they're supposed to reproduce. Um, they're sort of a disabled cell where they do have some function in your body. That's the reason why they still make them. But once they build up and get too many, then that's where you kind of hit the tipping point on your aging process. Uh,
That is so fascinating.
so there's a lot of chemical processes that go into it to dive into it. I could do like we could do 3 podcasts on mTOR, um, IGF-1, ghrelin, so those are kind of gets pretty in depth, but ultimately your body is able to do these types of things if you give it the chance. And like I said, most of the time, the chance that you have to give it is your gut has to stop digesting food for a little bit to allow all these other processes to happen. Um, Fasting helps increase and kind of going into the other layers. So we talked about intermittent fasting. You kind of get into like OMAD, where you're looking at like you eat one meal a day is what it stands for. So you're pretty much fasting for 23 to 24 hours every single day. You're really getting into like a heavier autophagy states around the 18 to 20 hour mark. So each day you start getting into that 4 to 6 hour range of full on autophagy. Ketone levels are elevated, and your body's actually utilizing its own stored body fat now to produce the energy that it needs. If you look at a normal fed person that just doesn't fast or anything like that, they usually have a ketone level of like 0.5 to 1 nanograms in their blood. When you're in a fasted state, or when you're even doing like a ketosis diet, you're getting in the range of 5 to 7. So there's a significant increase in the ketones that are floating in your actual bloodstream and being used for energy throughout your body. The other process that happens around the 24-hour mark with chemicals is we're looking at your stomach. Your stomach produces all your feel-good hormones, serotonin, uh, dopamine, stem cells. They're all produced in your gut. So when your gut's constantly at work, it's not producing these things. So it actually can hurt your sleep cycles. It can actually hurt your ability to regulate happiness, right? Dopamine is your happy, your feel good. That's why a lot of people that are like down and out, they turn to the cabinet because it's the instant dopamine spike, instant blood sugar spike. All those types of things happen in that process. So with this, it actually helps you reset your actual dopamine that you have available for your body. So you don't need external forces interfering with that. Um, and then as you continue in a fasted state, we can kind of go a little bit deeper, but your actual brain receptors, your transmitters in your brain will reset with this when you have a new fresh dose of serotonin and dopamine and other feel-good hormones. So it's really fascinating what your body naturally will do if you just once again kind of give it time versus having that thought, I'm starving myself. No, I'm going to eat what I'm going to eat, but it's going to be in a time restricted pattern, sort of say. So I allow my body to do what it needs to do. So that was the OMAD 24-hour piece. And then you got even longer extended periods. So at the 24-hour mark, you get a lot of new fresh stem cells, a lot of new fresh dopamine, serotonin being produced in your gut. At the 48-hour mark of a water fast and no calories, your neurotransmitters are resetting. So you're actually kind of getting a more or less a mental health upgrade at that point in time, right? It's like a nice big shot of uh, antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication because your body's resetting how it responds to dopamine. So at the 48 mark, you're sitting that. At the 72-hour mark, you're actually, they say, and a lot of studies have shown that you're actually regenerating new um, like you're basically resetting your immune system because now you're regenerating new white blood cells and other types of blood cells that help you, or I'm sorry, other types of cells that help your immune system function at a higher rate. So there's a lot of, and that's kind of like with your little bit of your prolonged, I'd say up to about 72 hours is your extended fasting periods. Once you start getting past 72 hours, you're starting to get into like prolonged fasting states where like, let's not go there yet.
Good, because I was like, okay, I'm following you up until the
Right.
72-hour mark. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that is really interesting. And I mean, I didn't realize that there were so many different types of fasting. So you said intermittent, the OMAD, one meal a day, and then the water fasting. And as you were speaking, I was going back to, like high school science class, like I was picturing the cell, what it looks like, and the membrane and the mitochondria. And so I think we'll definitely have to have you back, and maybe we'll do like a slideshow or something with images, because I'm a total visual person, and I think I love when we get back to the science of things, because I think that's why there's so much misconception, because people aren't talking about the science and what happens in your body when you're doing these things. They just say intermittent fasting, it's just you eat in these windows and off you go. It's like, well, no, like let's actually look at what are the benefits and what is actually happening on a science cellular level in your body. Because I mean, that's what wellness is. It's a state of being, like you said. It's an active process of making the choices that lead you to a happier, healthier, more fulfilling life. So,
Right.
um, what I wanted to ask you is, can we get into a little bit about who it's for? Like we did touch on it, but also who it's not for, if that's even a thing.
Right. So there's a couple areas. Let's start with who it's not for. Like, there is some literature that basically is like female fasting have to look at different times of the month, like not to do their fast during their cycle period, right? Like, so it's just a lot of things that are going on during that week. I'm not an expert into that, but I have seen like some disclaimers of like, hey, look, watch out for that. You can get those in your, your other 3 week period, do your fasting, but avoid that week. Also, obviously for pregnant, lactating mothers and those types of things, I would say, hey, look, probably eat a well balanced meal and diet and stay away from this for a little bit, and then we can go back into it later on in life, but or down the phase when you're not doing those types of things. So I think those are some of the ones. Um but there's a lot of literature even around people that are going through cancer treatments, right? Their cancer treatments are way more effective because they're actually utilizing a fasting strategy. And a lot of them are thinking that it's keeping their insulin levels down and their blood sugar levels at a lower rate, which isn't feeding cancer cells and those types of things. So not like adversely going against it. So people struggling, and I'll give you a little bit of my background. I was there was probably a combination of a lot of things. I was in the military for 6 years. I thought I was eating a diet that was good, right? Like, early 2000s, there's a lot of things that were heart healthy and all this other type of stuff. As I learned more, realized was not heart healthy. I was exposed to some different toxins. I was exposed to different vaccines. I was exposed to different drugs. So I don't really know if like the wheels just kind of fell off the bus. But I was getting ready to finish up my 6 years with Coast Guard, and I literally one day woke up and felt like I was a 50, 60-year-old man. Like my joints hurt. I was stiff. I had a pretty big shoulder injury when I was in college, which ended college baseball days. But that was 3 to 4 times worse than it ever had. Really interrupted my sleep patterns, and I dealt with that for about 4 to 5 years, kind of around the 2011 time frame.
Mhm.
And just had a moment one day where I was like, I'm walking off the building if I don't figure this out. Like had it planned out, called out of work, and said, this is the day we're fixing this, or I'm fixing it one way or the other. And basically that day kind of came across a couple different things, but fasting was one of them. I found a naturopathic doc that I started working with that kind of started helping me do a little different fasting things. I did some extended fasting at the very beginning because I wanted immediate results. I was cool with struggling for 72 hours not eating. I wanted to feel better. I had to feel better. Um, I threw out drugs that day. I was on Tylenol, Motrin, muscle relaxants, sleeping pills, occasional Oxycontins, of those types of things, depending on how bad I was. And the biggest thing that turned the corner was the fasting piece. Like it was one of the things that like I was able to see immediate results and feel the results like almost instantly. And I say with almost instantly, it was 3 days. I dealt with this for 4 or 5 years. Within 3 days, I was able to feel like instant results. My joints felt better. The inflammation in my body was lower. My eyes were better. Like the whiteness of my eyes were better. And I actually had a glimpse of what really feeling good was again. Um, and so it was just kind of one of those things. And that was just enough for me to continue and not want to walk off the building and saying, hey, okay, there's some hope here. Um, so that was the biggest why for me, right? So there's a lot of people out there might need to lose weight. There's people out there that I've talked to that were underweight. There's people out there that had disease states that we're trying to manage, right? Anything that is baseline, if it's caused from inflammation, this is really one of the best things that you can do for yourself, to start curbing that chronic inflammation state that a lot of people are in. So, as far as who's it for, really understand what you're wanting to do it for. If you're wanting to lose weight, there's really cool patterns. Like if you can work your way up to 16 to even 20 hours, they did a study where 16 hours in 6 months, the people lost on average 18 pounds. At 18 hours at 6 month mark, the people lost on average 32 pounds. At 20 hours on average fasting, people lost on average, I think it was almost 48 pounds. So it kind of gives you a little bit of like just extending a couple hours. So if weight loss is one of your biggest factors, or biggest goals for this, then work with that 16 to 20 hour pattern. I found at 18 for me, like body fat. I didn't have a whole bunch to lose. I just had like just sort of chronic inflammation throughout. But I noticed that stuff melted away when I started consistently doing that 18 hours. Um, and so those are the kind of the pieces. If you're looking because you're underweight, right? This is going to help you. A lot of people with underweight, they're not absorbing their food properly, right? So malnourishment is usually they can't absorb things. So you're giving your gut a chance to basically rest, heal, and then you're able to introduce more foods. And then you're upping your ghrelin and your IGF-1, which is going to help you absorb more food. It's the chemicals, or it's basically the hormones in your body that are going to help you upload and uptake calories from your food, just like testosterone and progesterone for women. Like those really help. As those decrease, you start declining absorption of your food. As you have the adequate levels of it, you start absorbing more of your food. So those are big things for it. Skin conditions. I usually typically recommend people doing like a 24 to 72 hour fast with that and maybe doing some routine intermittent fasting on a periodic basis. One protocol that I typically have followed for me is, like I said, that usually the 16 to 23-hour fasting, intermittent fasting window that I'll do. And then once a week, I usually try to do a couple 24-hour fast. Once a month, I try to do a 36-hour fast. Once every other month, I'll do a 48-hour fast. And then once a quarter, I try to do a 72-hour fast. So while keeping my normal fasting periods, and there's days where, I don't do my normal length, right? If I did a 48-hour fast, the next day, I'm not going to turn around and fast again for another 24 hours, right? I'm going to probably feed myself that day. Um, and I'm not really leveraging this anymore for weight loss or any of those types of things. Mine more so is for longevity, decreasing the inflammation process. I don't take any drugs anymore. I don't take Motrin, Tylenol. I haven't took big pharma meds. I had 2 surgeries over the last 3 years on my shoulder. Again, I finally had it replaced, which is doing great now, but did that without anti-inflammatories, did that out with pain meds. And literally I was able to regulate my pain and my inflammation levels through fasting. And um, I also follow a kind of anti-inflammatory diet as well too. So between the two, I've been able to manage my pain without drugs and those types of things. I'm 47. I don't take high blood pressure medication or cholesterol medications. And so really my overall thing is longevity and just ultimate health, right? Like I want to be as healthy as I can. But those are my fundamental goals, right? Like I've always trained as an athlete. I've always been an athlete. I still want to train and move like an athlete. But there's people out there that might want to be bodybuilders, right? So you can do all those types of things still fast on a routine basis and never really worry about like having to, like, you don't have to intermittent fast every single day. You might be able to throw an extended fast as a bodybuilder or somebody along those lines before you go into a show or whatever it might be. You might be surprised how lean you can really get over a few days and not lose the size that like not lose any size while you're going into shows and stuff like that. So there's a lot of advantages and benefits with that. Like I said, outside of a couple of those categories at the very beginning, I don't know who it's really not. I'd watch it for like younger kids and stuff like that. Not, because once again, can they comprehend why we're actually doing this and those types of things? But I do think kids can even benefit from skipping breakfast, because it just really is. We're in a state of constant feeding. I almost feel like today we've been conditioned to abundance, right? And anything that creates any type of maybe discipline or lack or restriction is like a bad thing. So I think abundance with everything is kind of a bad thing. Not saying don't live abundantly, but overabundance when you eat is not a good thing, right? It leads to a lot of downhill disease and illnesses and those types of things. The other thing, even with fasting, has shown to, like, neurological diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia, has shown like great improvement with fasting schedules and those types of things too. I think there's two parts to it. It keeps your insulin level down. You don't have really high insulin level spikes for a long period of time. And then the other thing is, I think you have extended periods when you're not exposing yourself to food toxins. And there's so many toxins in our food right now, right?
Yeah.
Like in the United States, Tufts University just released basically the new food pyramid, and it had Honey Nut Cheerios and Frosted Mini Wheats and M&Ms, like healthier than like eggs and butter and meat. So I'm like, hold on, what? Like, we're number
What?
two on the list is Frosted Mini Wheats. Like,
That's a
I
problem.
it's a problem, right? And every like, and it's kind of a down thing, but the toxins that I'm talking about, food toxins, is like every one of our cereals in the United States is sprayed with pesticide. It was 100%, like, it was pretty much 100% like these different pesticides and herbicides were found in these cereals. The whole Roundup thing that's going on with their lawsuit around the cancer causing pieces, that's like all that stuff is found in the US food sources. So really, I do believe we can benefit from not hitting ourselves with environmental toxins that are found in our food consistently as well too. It gives our body a chance to actually get those things out and move it through our system versus constantly bombarding it with it.
Yeah, and I think like even the soil, like our soil now isn't as free of toxins either. And I mean, I know that it's a bit more regulated here in Europe, but I'm not going to pretend to know all the ins and outs of the regulations. But
I'll send you a study I was just reading this morning. And it's
yeah,
actually looked at Europe and all those types of things. And just once again, like, what, even with all the regulations, what it's still found in. It was like almost 100% of our groundwater. So
it's
where, like,
wild.
even in Europe, right? Like, I almost can assure you it's, I bet you it's above 100% if we're talking about like how much in concentration it is in the United States here. So,
We have a lot to do as a collective
right.
to protect our produce,
Hmm.
our the meat that we eat, like even, even, and again, this is kind of going off tangent, but like what qualifies as an organic product? Like that
Hmm.
also is very different around the world. And there's also just, you have to meet a certain level. It's like, what?
Right.
No,
Right.
like if organic is organic and there should be a unanimous
Right.
definition of what that is. But I
Right.
mean, I digress. But I think
But I
what
mean, I think it all ties into it, right? Like, even with that, like, organic apples will still be sprayed up to 32 times in a grow season. Now they say it's with natural, like, it's not, I'm natural. It kills everything in that damn apple orchard, right? It may not kill it as fast as the non-organic pesticides, but it's going to kill everything in that. Like, a bee doesn't. Ooh, that's an organic field. Like, I know not to go over there, right? Like, it doesn't happen. These poor things are picking up this stuff, taking it back to their hives, and we wonder why, like, our pollinators are declining and those types of things. They're full of these pesticides and herbicides that end up killing them and shorten their lives. So it all ties back to big food for me. Big food isn't big food's out to produce high quantity, less cost, right? Like, more consumption, right? They get rewarded and paid by you eating more. It's the reason why the US population by 2030 will be over 50% obese, right? It's not working with what we're guiding. We're filling people up with sugars and we're filling people up with these types of things. They never have a chance of feeling good. And then now they crave, low quality fuel over and over and over again. In the United States in the 80s, big tobacco companies turned around and bought out big food companies. What is big tobacco known for, right? Adding additives to their products, right? Nicotine and stuff like that it's a plant base. Nicotine's really good for studying, but all the 50 other chemicals that you throw in that cigarette isn't probably that good for you to work with. But like just the actual plant form of that, a small amount of nicotine is better than like any ADHD drug on the market for
Mm.
focus and those types of things. But
Yeah.
once again, that's been demonized because it's a cigarette. And I'm not saying people use nicotine or any of that type of stuff, but it's just in reality of what we've been sold and what we've been told by big food, it's a marketing campaign. It is designed for them to increase their profits, not for us to increase our health. If we can just all just sort of get at a baseline and stop fighting over what meal plan is working, right? We should all be kind of working towards local farmers that have regenerative practices. I don't care if you eat meat or if you eat veggies. Like this is what we need to kind of work towards and get back to more natural plants and fruits and those types of things. Like all the crops in the world are monocropped, right?
Mhm.
Apples that we eat today didn't exist 100 years ago, right? Johnny Appleseed went around and started a whole genetic modification of trees. Um, so
Oh.
it is really interesting. Like 50, 60 in the 50s and 60s, you probably had maybe one or two apple choices. They were small and they were tart and they were bitter. Most people didn't eat them. Same thing with Brussels sprouts. 25, 30 years ago, people didn't eat Brussels sprouts. They were nasty. Now they're genetically engineered to be bigger, sweeter, and higher in carbs. So it they've modified out the bitter taste. And I'm not saying these things are bad, but they've also, with this, we've gotten into a monocrop type of state where these crops aren't even able to produce their own protection and protect themselves against pests and other types of diseases. And that's why we're independent on pesticides, right? Like that's why we have to spray these things on there. In natural states, food would develop a toxin. They have self-defense
Yeah.
mechanisms that keep animals from eating them. They don't possess that anymore because we've kind of engineered it out of them and said, oh, well, we'll use these different pesticides. So that kind of all ties into, I think this is the reason why fasting for a lot of people really notice a big difference because they start getting a lot of these chemicals out of their system or they start giving their body a chance to clear it out of their system. So their toxic load is going to decrease. In some situations, people do reduce calories when they fast, right? When they're fasting, they're not eating as much calories. So if you're toxic, if you're heavy and overweight and you're kind of suffering from insulin resistance, well, you need that, right? Like you need the ability for your body to sort of reset itself and turn on the good expressing genes versus the negative expressing genes.
So fascinating, Dave. Like we are definitely going to have you back. And Dave, I know you're working on a really exciting new project, new business, Mindful Warriors Wellness. And I think, I mean, I can't wait to see this come to life because you're so knowledgeable. You clearly do your research, you look at the science behind things, you look at studies, and and it's your own personal journey. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to hitting that point, whatever that point was. I know for me, it was in 2017 where I was just like, I need a total wellness reset. Like I just need to escape life to find life. And I went retreat hopping and did a total wellness reset and took a wellness coaching certification because I just needed that reset for myself. So I think wherever you're at on your journey, I think it's easy. First of all, I hope you've really taken a lot out of this conversation in terms of what is fasting, what is not fasting, how can you start, who is it for, who is it not for. If you have any questions, talk to your doctor, put it in a comment. We'll bring Dave back. If you want us to dive in deeper into anything, let us know. Again, leave it in the comments. Share this with anyone who might be struggling to, lose weight, gain weight. just feel better, more energized. I know for me personally, I used to think breakfast is the most important meal of the day because that's what we're conditioned to do. And I don't probably stop eating at like 8 and I have my first meal at 10, which is, pretty solid. What is that? 12 hours?
14.
14. I was like, oh my
14,
God,
yep.
I can't even my
Do
math.
you do you
So
know
it's like,
where the breakfast is the most important meal came from?
where?
So it's alleged that the Kellogg's brothers, so the Kellogg cereal, so these guys were like these religious fanatics. And so basically they were making a cereal or a mushy cereal that was supposed to stop men from masturbating. Like it's all like written around their whole types of things. So this is something that I like stumbled upon like 8 months ago. I'm like, is this for real? And then just went
What?
into it. So they knew this was going to lower the testosterone levels of healthy young male to decrease because they deemed like all these different things like the devil did it. I'm like, you just made devil food like to prevent the devil. Like it doesn't make sense to me, right? Like you are intentionally created food that you know is going to harm a young male.
Wow.
But and
I
we
was
sit around
not
it.
expecting that, Dave.
Yep.
I
I
don't think
wasn't
any of our
expecting it
listeners were
either.
expecting that either.
No,
I was like, oh my goodness.
the old Kellogg brothers.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, like it's wild. And on the podcast, we do explore a lot of these, conditionings that we've got and how do we change human behavior and how do we, step into that modern self-mastery by, just educating ourselves, questioning things, challenging things, but also just going back to basics, like, what we were talking about today. It's like how we were doing, and we've just been conditioned to eat more and have this and anyway, do all that stuff. But
Yeah,
um
I always find it
any
fascinating when people talk about essentially like fasting is bad for you and those types of things. But those same people have no issue like rolling up through a McDonald's drive-through, right? Like eating some Oreos, bags of chips, right? So I get that question all the time. Like we'll be out or whatever, and somebody will be on their eighth, not saying anything with drinking, or I've stopped drinking 12, 13 years ago, but they'll be sitting there having a drink and look at me and be like, oh, you're starving yourself. I'm like, this is about your fourth, fifth bubbly over here that you're talking to, right? So it's always interesting when you hear from the people that usually are the biggest objectors to things. I think they're conditioned to not want to hear it too, right? They're sort of protecting their own image and protecting themselves from their insecurities from different things. So, like I said, if you've hit your rock bottom or if you're close and you want a health overhaul, like this is one of the fastest ways that I've been able to do.
That's amazing. And if people want to get a hold of you, Dave, is there somewhere, or we'll put some contact information around this
Yep.
video somewhere?
I can get you that information. Probably through, we're starting to get our Instagram page up and running with Mindful Warrior Wellness. And our website is under construction. So that should be coming up here shortly too, as well. So now, one of the biggest things that I do talk about is, just obviously the fasting and sort of breaking down some of the myths and the common marketing that we hear over the last 100 years about our food-based pieces, right? So we're starting to see more and more research come out about fasting and those types of things where we used to have this at the tip of our fingers, but with modern medicine, we kind of wanted to demonize a lot of that type of stuff and make everybody think that the pill is the answer versus yourself. So,
Yeah, I actually started watching oh, is it Painkiller on Netflix?
mhm.
Anyway, I haven't finished it. I just got off the first episode. So not to, plant any seeds there, but that was a fascinating first episode. And like I said, everybody, we're gonna have Dave back. So if there are things you want us to dive in deeper, if there are challenges that you're facing, let us know in the comments and we will bring Dave back. We'll bring anyone we need to help you master yourself and get your state of being well and healthy and happy and wealthy and fulfilled and everything you could even imagine. So thanks again, Dave, and we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks. Have a great day. Take care.